Hey guys, today I'm going to show you an RPGMaker MV tutorial of how to make a very simple menu. This is great for games in RPGMaker that are not necessarily the full JRPG experience, meaning you don't need things like your party actors or combat skills or equipment or status effects. You don't need all of that stuff. Maybe you're making a simple narrative game, a simple story game, a horror game, where you need very little in the menu and you don't want to pull up that gigantic thing that's the default menu, okay? So this is going to be a very simple menu you can use instead. Here's a demo for a game I'm working on. Just has one map, as you can see here. It's very simple for a fishing minigame. So let's take a look at the menu. If we press F, the menu comes up. You can see this is our fishing log. We can catch small fish, big fish, or rare fish. Right now we have none of any. It says press C to close, press C, and it's closed. So let's see how those variables change. We need to talk to this old man. Come fish our beautiful lake. Yes, you'll need a fishing rod. Here, take one of mine. So you have a fishing rod now. It says you can fish anywhere you see a sparkle on the lake. I need to fix this actually. Should be this little rock. If you find that all the fish seem to have left the spot, just grab some fish food from that box by the house. So let's test this out. If we go over to the rock, we see we caught a big fish. Now if we press F to see our menu again, we now have one big fish. Press C to close. Let's see what else we can catch. Caught a small fish. Got another big fish. Nothing bites, so we should have two big fish and one small fish, I believe. Let's check our menu. Yes, we have two big fish, one small fish. Alright, so let's see how to do this. Alright, so to do this you're going to need 4 plugins in particular. You will need Yanfly Core Engine, YEP Core Engine. You will need Yanfly Button Common Events, YEP Button Common Events. You need SmRndmDde Super Tools Engine, and you need SmRndmDde HUD Maker. Okay, so the core engine you need in order to make the Button Common Events plugin work. So it needs to go above Button Common Events in your plugin manager. You need the Super Tools engine in order to make the HUD Maker work. So Super Tools engine needs to go above your HUD Maker in the plugin list. You might need to play around depending on how many plugins you have with the exact order. That tends to be pretty important on executing things, but as you can see here I have a few things in between and it still works. So let's take a look. Alright, so here is my file folder for the game I just showed you, this little fishing game. It's called RPD2 Maps. Don't worry about why. We're going to look in our JS, our JavaScript folder, and our plugins folder. All you have to do to install plugins in RPGMaker MV is simply copy the plugin file into this folder. So you can see here we have the Super Tools engine and the HUD Maker, and we also have the Yanfly Core Engine and the Yanfly Button Common Events. They're only in this order, obviously, because it's in alphabetical order. You don't need to worry about the order in the file folder. So once they are in that folder, you will need to turn them on and add them here in RPGMaker MV. You can see them listed here: Super Tools Engine, HUD Maker, Button Common Events, Core Engine. So once you have the plugins, the first thing you're going to do actually is create an event on your map. I called this auto stuff, very professional, and it calls 2 common events, and it runs these parallel, set to below characters. Make sure this is on parallel. It calls 2 common events. One is called hide normal menu, one is called fish variables. So let's look at our common events. This does one thing, and that is to disable the normal menu in RPGMaker MV. So to make this happen, all we have to do is go into Event Commands, go to page 3, change menu access, and hit disable. Okay? Since it's already here, I don't need to add it again. Now for our fish variables, this is super important because this is how you're going to know how many fish you've caught on that menu I showed you. That's how the numbers were changing to 1 fish, 2 big fish, etc., etc. So this is where we need to set our variables. What's really important here is that you are looking for the number of the variable and not the ID of the item itself. Now, in order to do these variables, first we need to set some items. We need to tell the game that 3 items exist. we have items called small fish, items called big fish, and items called rare fish. So we go over to items. These top four are just default in the game. I just haven't deleted them. Small fish is going to be right here. I'm going to add it. I didn't change any of these stats because the game is just a demo and it's pretty simple. But for a bigger game, obviously, you would want to change these probably, I would assume, to not consumable, etc., regular item. It just kind of depends on what your items are. But for small fish, we see we've added an item, we've added big fish, we've added rare fish. So now we can go to our common events and we're going to set 3 variables, which is telling the game the amount of each of those items that we have. So for small fish, we go to control variables, variable single. We're going to create a variable called small fish amount. Okay, this is the number of fish that you have in your inventory. It is not the number that defines the ID of the item. I know that's kind of confusing. We're gonna have this one. So we're gonna pick small fish amount. We're gonna set it to a constant in game data, and the constant is gonna be set to our item that we made, which is small fish. Okay. So as you can see, I just added the same thing. So this tells it that control variable number 7 should tell us the amount of small fish we have in our inventory. And then we're going to do the same for big fish, same for rare fish. Okay, so we'll look at these real quick. We created a variable called big fish amount. It's right here. And we told it in game data to be the number of big fish, which is an item that we have defined. Okay, I'm just going to delete this. Okay, and we run that here in our auto stuff event, common event hide normal menu, common event fish variables. This will run both of those common events I just showed you that tell the game how much fish we have in our inventory and hide the regular menu that comes with the game. Okay, so now let's create our menu. I'll show it to you again. We're going to create this image right here. This image is actually 1280 by 720, which is the resolution of my game, so that it fits and doesn't move around depending on, you know, where you put the window and whatnot. So I match it to the resolution just to make sure it's exact. Okay, so here's what that image looks like in Photoshop. Okay, 1280 by 720. It just has one layer since I've put everything down together, but basically I pulled this piece of paper off of Unsplash, which is a website that gives you royalty-free photos. It's great. I pulled these fish images off of OpenGameArt, which is another website that gives you free images to use depending on the license. And then I just put these, I made these little lines and text and these little boxes as well, okay, just using the shape tool in Photoshop. And then the last thing I did was put a gradient behind the paper, just so it kind of separates from the background a little bit when you open up the menu. It helps you kind of focus a little bit more on that. So I called this fish_menu.png. Very important that it's a PNG file so that it reads that there is nothing behind the gradient and the main image. Okay, this will all show up blank. All these little squares will not be shown in the game because it's a PNG. So now we need to get our map image into our game. When you go on to SmRndmDde's website here and download the plugin, which I'll leave a link in the description, make sure you also download sample images. This will give you a zip file that is really important for where things need to go in order to make everything show up for the HUD Maker. If you don't have those folders, then you won't be able to select picture or gauges or anything else under Create New Element when we actually look at the HUD Maker. So if you download that file, this little zip file here, we're going to open it up, HUD Maker sample images, and then you're going to take all of these, copy them. So in our game folder, we're going to look at the images folder, IMG. We're going to make a new folder called SmRndmDde, spelled like this. You're going to need to make a new folder to do that. Inside that folder, we're going to make a folder called HUD, all lowercase. And then we're going to paste everything that we copied from that zip file into here. Okay, so this will make everything show up properly. Then, in order to get the actual map image into the game, we're going to go into Pictures. And these all come just with the zip file. You can delete them, but we're going to make sure and add in our menu picture. So this is the same one we just did, fish_menu.png. So now we're going to set up that image, fishmenu.png, in the game itself and tell the game that it's our menu and we need it to show up. We're going to treat it as a HUD element, which is why we need SmRndmDde's HUD Maker. So since we have those plugins installed, when we press F12, we're going to get this core editor that's going to pop up. And we are looking for the HUD Maker. Okay, so here you can see that whole menu I just showed you is a HUD with a few different elements that we'll go through, okay? So first we're going to tell the game to use that image as the background of the menu. Picture fish menu, okay? So in order to make this, you would go to this drop-down menu here and click Picture. You tell it the file name, which is fish_menu. You don't need to put the .png. And you put it as layer 0, okay? So the HUD elements stack depending on their number. So 0 is the very bottom layer. Something with layer 1 will go on top of that, layer 2 will go on top of that, etc., etc. So let's look at our values, okay? And I'll go over this condition thing in just a second. So our values are how we are going to make these numbers change depending on how many fish we have. So this small fish here, okay, we're gonna put in the value $, squiggly bracket, $, game, variables, the V capitalized, .value, open parentheses, and then this number, if you remember, number 7 is the number of the variable, okay, that we'll check that. We'll double check that back in the game. Then we're going to close it with the parentheses and another squiggly bracket, okay? So you can copy, and this will tell us how many small fish we have, and then I just place this little number here. You can place it anywhere depending on, you know, what your menu looks like and where you want it to be. And you can see I put it as layer 2 to make sure that it comes up on top of this image. Next, we're going to look at our big fish number. We're going to paste this same variable here, or this same text here in the value, except we're going to change the number to 8, because 8 is the value of our variable that tells us how many big fish we have. Big fish should be variable number 8. And let's look at our last one, rare fish, okay? It should be variable number 10. It's the exact same text, we just change the number. Any changes you make in here, you need to hit refresh to see them, okay? So if you change your font or the size or all that kind of stuff, you can play around with all of these values depending on what you want for your menu. Then we just need one more thing, which is the press C to close text. This is just to tell the player how to close the menu, basically, because if we don't tell them, they won't know what button to press and they won't be able to get back to the game. So I put press C to close. I'm going to show you how to assign that value in just a bit. And then the big thing we need to put for all of these, okay, this is super important, is this condition box. This is going to tell the game only pull this menu up when we flip a certain switch. And when we flip that switch off, close the menu so that the player can be fishing, they can open the menu, see how many fish they've caught, close it, go back to fishing whenever they want, okay? So the condition we're going to put is $, game switches, instead of variables this time, okay? Switches is capitalized, .value, parentheses, switch number 6, and that's just because that's the number of the switch that I used, okay? It can be whatever switch a number that you have, and I'll show you that in just a second. So you need to make sure that is set for all of these. Every single one should have the same condition because they're all going to be called together and then they're going to be put away together. Okay? So this part might be a little bit confusing, but in order to make the menu come up when we press F and go away when we press C, we're going to need to assign that in the button common events plugin. So first let's make our common events so we know what to assign to those buttons. So in order to make the menu come up when we press F and go away when we press C, we need to define what those common events are. So we're going to go to our database with our little gear, go to common events, and we need two common events. One is to show the HUD, and one is for no mo HUD, which is to put it away, just turn it off. So show HUD, this is going to be a switch, okay? This whole thing kind of functions on turning a switch on, which shows the menu, and turning it off, which puts it away. So the switch, if you remember, is number 6 in our HUD Maker, okay? We're going to go to Control Switches. When we press this, it's going to bring up this little menu where we can put, you know, however many switches we have, whatever they're called. I put it as 6 just to give it a number that I would kind of remember a little bit more easy. And I called it Show HUD, okay? And in order to turn it on, we're going to put Show HUD and we're going to put Operation On, okay? So that's what is going to happen when the switch is on. For Show HUD Off, we're going to create another common event and we're going to do the same thing, we're just going to turn it off. Okay, that's the only thing that changes. It's the same switch, the same Show HUD switch, except this time we turn it off. So now we have our switches set up, and here's how we're going to assign them to whatever keyboard buttons we want. Okay, our common events here, we know that to turn the HUD on, it's common event number 3. To turn it off, it's common event number 4. This can be anything, obviously, depending on what you have in your game. To change the maximum, it defaults to 4 when you open a game, but you can change it to whatever you want. So 3 is on, 4 is off. Now, we go into our plugin manager, and we're going to go to this Button Common Events plugin from Yanfly. Okay, this plugin lets you bind common events to individual buttons on your keyboard. Okay, so you can, this is a really awesome plugin you can use for tons and tons and tons of different things. Here's what we're going to do for the menu. We're going to change the F key to open the menu, F for fish, and then we're going to change the C key to close the menu, C for close. Okay, so you can pick any of these, obviously. You can do whatever you want with your game. I just picked F because it's the same letter of fish. So when you double click this, it'll bring up a little menu here for common event and says this is the common event to call when this button is pressed. Okay, so to set it to 0 if you don't want a common event to call, that's why all of these are set to 0, so that if the player just presses things on the keyboard, random things won't happen. But we do want to change what happens when we press the F key, so we're going to set it to 3. Okay, if we see this drop down menu, it shows us all of our common events we've defined. And if you remember, 3 is on, 4 is off. So to show the HUD, we're going to press 3. And then when we want to close it, we're going to do 4. Okay, so that tells the game that when we press these keys, F and C, it should make these things happen. And what we're making happen is these common events. And what these common events are making happen is they're turning switches on and off. And the reason that is important is because when we go into our Super Tools engine, which in order to access, you want to play your game, okay, and then press F12, and it will bring this up. In our Super Tools engine, we go into our HUD Maker, and we have told the game that these things we put in our HUD should only be shown when the switch is flipped. So the switch is going to start off, okay, that's just how it's going to default in the game, which is good for us because then we can tell it to show the menu when we turn it on and then turn it back off when we want the menu to go away. So that's why we need all of these to be the same condition with the value of our switch, which is 6. Okay? Now, when we play our game, you can't see my keyboard, but When I press F, it brings up our menu. And when I press C, it closes it, okay? It turns the switch on, turns it off. All right, guys, I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below. I can't guarantee I'll be able to answer it since I'm not an RPG Maker expert, but I've been using the program on and off for a few years. I've made a short narrative game, which you can find on itch.io, that I'll link in the description. And now I'm kind of diving back in to make some demos for a larger game. I may post more tutorials in the future. Otherwise, this YouTube channel is mainly an archive for my streams. I stream on Twitch under NimbleFizz. Sometimes I stream game dev, and I also stream RPG Maker games, lots of indie games, Nintendo games, all that kind of stuff. Cozy games is what I call it. So feel free to drop a subscribe or like, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!